My name is Mike Warlick. I'm the Vice President for Defense at FCA. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being such a great audience this morning, if all of you were at the breakfast session. I'm really have the honor of introducing our two speakers for this session. Christopher Barnhurst, this is Executive Deputy Director, and Major General Garrett Yee, Assistant to the Director. I want to make just a couple comments. I don't want them to kick me off the stage. They probably will try to do that, but it won't work. But I'll start with Mr. Barnhurst. In college, he worked for DISA during his summer and winter breaks within the G3 as a student hire, so he has roots that go pretty far back. And then over the years, he had many roles in DISA, including the job as the DISA's principal advisor to the comptroller. Think about that. We heard a little bit about what comptroller does a while ago. He also served as the manager for DISA's Defense Working Capital Fund budget and operations division. Needless to say, as the Chief Financial Officer, he's a right-hand man for Lieutenant General Skinner and the DISA team in all matters, especially fiscal. General Yee. It's hard to talk about General Yee. But let me just say this about him. And you heard a little bit about this from the stage this morning. As an assistant director, he helps lead DISA global organization of 8,000 plus military and government personnel. This team plans, develops, delivers, and operates the joint interoperable C2 capabilities and the global enterprise infrastructure. We heard quite a bit about that in our first session today by the General. I will just say this, he is steeped in experience, and wherever he goes, he makes a positive impact, always leaning forward, with one other caveat. He generally has a sense of humor. Ladies and gentlemen, meet your panel.
Well, thanks, Mike. And I hope you feel the warmth of the fire that we have for today's Fireside Chat. General Skinner did a great job this morning, kind of giving you a higher level view of some of the changes that we have at DISA organizationally. And then he talked about, there are 5 lines of effort that he talked about on the DISA side of that slide. And so in this Fireside Chat, we're going to explore, a little bit more deeper, what is that, reorganization look like? What's that alignment look like? And then we'll dig into those 5 lines of effort. And so, Mr. Barnhurst, over to you to kick us off.
Very good. Mic's working. All right, thank you. Thank you, General Yee. So what we thought we'd do wouldn't be a government presentation without slides, right? So we do have a few slides to go through, but I'll try to cover that ground relatively quickly. And then ultimately we'll get to some back and forth between General Yee and I and open it up for your guys' questions. Just to give you a sense of what we're going to try to talk through here, really 3 topics at the outset. One, General Skinner alluded to in his discussion, leadership changes. So I will walk through a multitude of leadership changes for your guys' awareness. 2, we want to talk about organizational change. You've heard now a couple times about the restructuring or redesign of the organization. And we want to try to flesh that out, give you some historical context as to what got us to this point, help you understand what the new organization looks like. And then as we walk through that, what I'll do is highlight a couple key portfolios and areas within those portfolios where we could use industry's partnership, much in the way that General Skinner described earlier. We'll dive a little bit deeper on that. And then, like General Yee said, we'll open it up and have some discussion and some question-answer time. Okay, so from a leadership perspective, in the last 6 to 12 months, we've had Vice Admiral Nancy Norton retire, Tony Montemarano, my predecessor as the Deputy Director of the agency, many of you probably knew, retired after 50 years of service. We've also had Dave Bennett, our Director of Operations at the time, retire. We've had Stu Timmerman, who is the Director of our Development and Business Center, retire, and then Rory Kinney, who was the Director of our organization running our core data centers, also retired, right? So that's some serious horsepower, right, that goes out the door. That, all told, is about 170 years of government experience. That's gone. I was joking earlier, said another way, a lot of old people left, right? So now you get me. In with the new, right? And we'll show some pictures a little bit later so you can put a face to the name if that's helpful. But myself replacing Tony Montemarano as the Deputy Director, obviously General Skinner you just heard from, replacing Admiral Norton. But Don Means, formerly led our Fourth Estate Network Optimization, or DoD Net, effort along with our National Leadership Command capability. portfolio, and he was promoted up to be basically the director of operations, replacing Dave Bennett. Jason Martin, who used to be the vice director of our development and business center, replaced Stu Timmerman as the director. And I'm kind of intentionally not naming the new organizations, right, because we're going to roll through that here. The names have changed. And then, of course, Ms. Sharon Woods, the director of the Cloud Computing Program Office, is now kind of I was going to say dual-hatted, but we've combined those organizations, so really single-hatted as the acting director of our new hosting and compute center, and we'll dive into that a little bit going forward. So a lot of new faces and new positions, so to speak, but certainly an exciting time. So before I get into the slides here and talk about the reorganization, and we'll throw some pictures up so you can kind of better grasp what it looks like. What I thought I'd do is give you some history and context, just very briefly, about where we're coming from and then what we've done to get to the point that we're at today. For context, right, the last major reorganization of DISA was in the 2015-2016 timeframe. And during that time, we moved to a two-center construct. It's kind of the easiest way to think about it. We had one center that was focused on primarily acquisition, development, and business activities within the agency. And then we had one center that was focused on sustaining and operating those capabilities. Over time, though, what we've seen is a couple of things. One, we've added mission, right? So since then, we've added the joint service provider, providing desktop services, amongst other capabilities for the Pentagon, the Mark Center, a whole host of other areas, joint staff, et cetera. We've added the Cloud Computing Program Office as recently as January of this year. And we've taken on the Fourth Estate Network Optimization mission to consolidate down defense agency, classified, unclassified network service desks and contracts to a single unclassified and classified network and a BPA type agreement for purchasing power, et cetera, right? So we've had an influx of mission, I think is one way to think about it. And we live in an era of DevSecOps, right? Everybody hears about agile development activities. So when you talk about having one entire organization focused on development, but then throwing those things over the fence to another to sustain and operate those capabilities, doesn't really work anymore, right? We're developing constantly. Think about 2-week sprints and those kinds of things. So that construct, that kind of dividing line, no longer holds true. Okay, so with that, we started a mission analysis effort. General Skinner alluded to this in his opening comments. I won't spend a ton of time on this because it was really looking inward. But basically, the intent there was to get 5 different stakeholder groups, all different ranks, grades, different parts of the agency, to engage in a conversation on what the organization has in terms of challenges and how we might be able to use an organizational redesign to get after some of those as priorities. So with that in mind, the feedback we received focused on 4 core areas, and hopefully you can link these to the organization that you see here in just a second. But those were communication, unity of effort, prioritization, and workforce empowerment. And so with all that in mind, as the General said earlier, you kind of boil that down to our organizational design leading up to this period was too complex to deliver best value to the department, right? So the idea was, how do we simplify the structure? How do we flatten the organization so that we can increase the speed of communication up and down the chain of command and across organizations? How do we provide more clarity about roles and responsibilities? In some ways, you'll see we've clarified titles and things like that to get after that. And then how do we align functional capabilities in a way that delivers unity of effort? And what that really means is where over time we've had multiple organizations providing similar functions, if you will, we want to consolidate those, get them under one leadership chain, right, and have someone manage an entire portfolio to be much more effective and efficient going forward. All right, so with that in mind, let's jump to the first slide. Okay, so I just covered most of this. I'm going to skip this slide, go to the next one. All right, former agency structure. What you see here is very vertical, right? You see the 2 centers in the middle there that I described earlier. We've put the current leadership on there, but a couple things. One, those layers of reporting hampered our ability to move at speed, which in today's environment is critical. So what you'll see when we move to the next slide is going to be a flattening of that structure. In the yellow, I mentioned earlier, lack of clarity about roles and responsibilities. what I want to highlight is we had an organization called the Services Development Directorate, right? They worked our command and control portfolio. They worked our internal business systems and some, not all, enterprise services. And we also had something called the Services Directorate, which does nothing of the sort. They run data centers, 10 of them, right? So when I look at that org chart, if I'm new to the agency or if I'm external to the agency, right, or an industry, I don't know the difference between those two blocks. There's no clarity for me when I look at that. And so what we wanted to do in the new structure is help clarify those kinds of issues, and then also where I mentioned we only had some enterprise services in one directorate, some were in another, right? We're going to unify all that going forward. The last thing I'll note on this slide, you see in the bottom left there, strategic priorities buried within the former structure. Customer focus. Our mission partner engagement office is actually within the development and business center in this structure, and that can narrow their focus, right? Whereas what we want them to do is be focused across the entirety of the agency's mission. Enterprise architecture. You'll see we established a chief technology officer in the new structure who has now the authorities to drive DISA's technology and architecture of the future. Automation and orchestration, we're doing it in pockets, but we're not doing it consistently across the agency. And then last, strategic communications, again, was within that development and business center. And we want to pull that up and give it more of an agency view. So you see two of these things pop up again as I go through the next set of slides. Next slide. All right, new structure. It's funny to watch everyone's cameras go up. So you see us go from 2 to 4 centers, right? The chart looks a little bit flatter. Again, getting after that speed of information flow. I'll just walk left to right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to dive into each one of these. I'll show you the picture of who's leading it and talk about a few functional capabilities where we need your help. So on the left side, Digital Capabilities and Security Center. Again, that's Mr. Martin. Moving to the right, we've got a new center, Hosting and Compute Center. That's led by the Acting Director, Sharon Woods. That combines what used to be the Cloud Computing Program Office with our on-premise data center hosting capabilities. So we have one center now focused on all things hosting. Doesn't matter if it's commercial cloud, doesn't matter if it's on-prem, right? We've got to drive and get after it, basically. Then we've got the Operations and Infrastructure Center, Don Means, focused on endpoint services and customer support. That's our DoDNet type delivery. Transport services, think about the worldwide network backbone. And then cyberspace operations, how we actually operate the infrastructure and defend it. And then last, Enterprise Integration and Innovation Center. You heard General Skinner talk quite a bit about wanting to refocus the agency on innovation, right? And this is a deliberate effort to drive after that. So we've got Steve Wallace now moving over under this center as our Chief Technology Officer. We've got Raj Shah as our engineering lead, doing modeling and simulation for the agency, but also now as our lead for enterprise automation and orchestration activities. So he's now got the authority to drive that set of activities across the entirety of the agency to make sure we have unity of effort there. And then, as we talked about in the last session, the risk management executive and our newly stood up, as of the last, I'll say 9 months, Office of the Chief Data Officer. And that's Ms. Caroline Kaharski. Next slide. Okay, so digital capabilities and security, Jason Martin, again, the director. If we build this out a little bit more. Other leadership changes to note, Dr. Brian Herman, who used to head our services directorate, is now the head of our cybersecurity and analytics directorate. So significant change there. Dr. Serena Chan, who used to lead that effort, is now senior technical advisor within our operations center. What I want to highlight here in the cyber portfolio, you guys have heard about Thunderdome. We'll talk about it more when General Yee and I get into a little bit of a back and forth up here, and certainly throughout the convention here. But you know, when you think about Thunderdome, it is the largest single shift in our network and security architecture since Joint Regional Security Stacks came into play, I'll say 5-6 years ago, maybe even a little more. So it is substantial, it is all-encompassing, and it is absolutely going to require close partnership with industry to deliver on a litany of capabilities that together will form what we call Thunderdome. If you want to keep building out. All right, another leadership change. So where Brian Herman used to be the director of what's now called the Joint Enterprise Services Directorate, since he's moved to our cybersecurity directorate. Miss Caroline Bean, who had previously led our DIOS efforts to adopt 365 in the IL5 environment, is now the acting director of that Joint Enterprise Services Directorate. What I want to note there is, we've stood up Microsoft 365 in the unclass environment. We've got over 200,000 users in that space since the start of the pandemic. And we're putting the pedal down to move that also to the secret environment over the next, I'll say, 12 to 18 months. And we've also realigned our enterprise services here to include DoD mobility, which is a focus area of ours, to, I'll say, modernize the way we provide commercial solutions for classified to the department. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but that area, that space has expanded greatly since the pandemic started. And again, this is where we're looking to industry for the best ideas of how to deliver that secure mobile solution set for our mission partners. And if you want to keep building out. Additional leaders, Chris Argo, Defense Spectrum Organization, and then Captain Matthias, our JITC commander. Next slide. All right, Hosting and Compute Center, Sharon Woods, Acting Director. If we keep building that out. Tony Purvis runs our operations, on-prem operations. What I want to highlight here, and again, we'll probably touch on this in a bit, is JWCC. That is our joint warfighting cloud computing contract effort. Right, it's a multi-vendor solution, but it underpins what we're doing with JADC2 across the department in the sense that it will allow for compute operations in the commercial cloud, again, multi-vendor, across all three classification levels, so unclassed, secret, top secret, with cross-domain solutions built in, delivering that cloud capability to the tactical edge, which is key for JADC2, and is critical to the way that we drive forward as a department. Next slide. All right, operations and infrastructure. Don Means, there he is. Larry Klusser is his vice director. I mentioned Serena Chan moving over as a senior technical advisor. You see them there. If we keep building out. Desktop services portfolio. This is our fourth estate network optimization effort, moving to DoDNet. And if you keep building out one more.
We even have Don here, so if Don could stand up. There he is. He's the guy. Give him a hand.
Thanks for coming out, Don.
I was trying to put a face, whatever, to the face.
Right, the real face to the picture.
All right.
All right, very good. So when we talk transport, the key from an industry perspective there, I think, is we're looking at resiliency and survivability, right? So we're engaging with you, our partners, on that, about how we make sure that that transport infrastructure is always on, even on a bad day type scenario. And I won't get into a ton of that here, but that's kind of one of our core focuses in that space, I would say. Next slide. Joe Wassel, of course, our cyberspace operations director.
Where's Joe?
All right, and then last but certainly not least, we do have Roger Greenwell in attendance as well. Roger, don't be shy. There you are. Everyone's favorite risk management executive, right? All right. So Roger takes over as the director of our Enterprise Integration and Innovation Center, if we want to build this out. I think I've talked to most of this, so I will, in the interest of time, not necessarily repeat. But what I do want to highlight here is that automation and orchestration capability set, that I alluded to earlier. Where we need industry's help is how do we get from doing this in a disparate manner across both, I'll say, our business functions as well as our mission functions, and really bring capability to bear to start providing automation and orchestration, across the spectrum of services that we offer. Everything from automating, how we take orders and provision them in a much more timely fashion to get after speed to capability, to how do we automate responses to cybersecurity incidents and things like that going forward. So that's kind of a key focus area from this group's perspective. Next slide. Okay, some key initiatives. I highlighted most of these throughout the discussion, so I won't necessarily go into them here. What I thought I'd do is, General Yee, turn it over to you, and we can make this more of a discussion.
Sure. So first of all, you all are very smart by attending this session today. So my hat's off to you, because normally we don't show org charts, right? And those of you with cameras and took pictures of those org charts, keep those. And the so what there is, a lot of times when industry wants to meet with us, yeah, it's easy to see, General Skinner, myself, Chris Barnhurst on a website. But really, the smart money is reaching out to the folks that you saw, reaching out to Roger, Don Means, Jason Martin, Sharon Woods at that level, because that's really where they're getting into the programs. That's where they're leaning forward in terms of, hey, what we need to do to move this agency forward. So kudos to all you that took out your cameras, because I don't know that we're actually going to publish this slide deck, beyond today. So we'll see. Now, the director talked about organizational changes and alignments, which Mr. Barnhurst did a really good job shepherding us through that process. And sometimes change is hard. This wasn't easy, but surprisingly, we were all rowing in the same direction, and it's only been a month. So kudos to Mr. Barnhurst in leading that effort. My first question, though, is going to be about Mr. Barnhurst. Who is this guy? Because, he wasn't a Dave Bennett, and he wasn't a Stu Timmerman, who had been kind of out there in the public a lot. Chris has actually been with the agency a long time, maybe not as long as you think, maybe longer than you think, but he's got interesting background. So Chris, just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself first.
I feel like this is the allow myself to introduce myself segment, right? Just by way of background, I started with DISA, I think as the intro stated, as a GS3 when I was still in college. And I've been here ever since. So I've been here about 17 years, which is actually dangerously close to half my entire life, I think, which is a weird way to put it. But started in the financial realm as a budget analyst, working capital fund issues, kind of rose up through the ranks, as you heard, and eventually landed in the deputy CFO and then the CFO gig from there. And that's kind of what I used to gain the right experience, the right exposure, understand the agency at a macro level, ultimately set me up well for this job. On a personal side, I met my wife at DISA. One of the first things when we were both interns actually at the same time. Got a great family, got 3 young kids, all under the age of 7, right? So you might think this is a stressful job. I come to it to relax. This is, easy part of my day. I commute 50 miles each way from Virginia up to Fort Meade, and again, that's like the quiet time, the Zen time for me. Second I open the door, I get barraged, like anyone who's a parent knows. A lot going on in the house at any given time. So that's a little bit about me, my background, kind of where I come from.
So what about this GS3 to Tier 3 SES career, which is quite amazing, is his background in the financial piece of what we do with the department. And so, being able to have great ideas is one thing, but having them resourced actually is more important than having a good idea. And so the things that we're laying out over the next year are things that are resource informed. And having the deputy with that kind of extensive financial background, means that he has the wherewithal to help leverage, the department to help us move forward. Right? And so when, and these Tier 3 SES appointments, they have to be approved not only internally at the DISA level, they go to OSD for approval. And so he had folks at OSD in CAPE, in Comptroller, and the DoD CIO that had worked with Chris that said, good choice, let's do it. And so we are fortunate to have Chris as our Executive Deputy Director. So now we're going to talk about those 5 lines of effort and the so what. And back to being resource informed, right? The director put out 5 lines of effort. We'll talk a bit about those, what they mean. And if you're thinking through skating to the puck, shooting the duck, not after the duck, where are we going to be in 2 or 3 years with these lines of effort? Maybe you can help us, right? That's the so what of why we're doing this. Maybe you'll hear something today that lets you think that maybe there's something there that we can help, move forward with one of those 5 lines of effort. Some are kind of obvious, maybe some aren't so obvious. So the first one is, prioritizing command and control. So Chris, your thoughts on what that means?
Yeah, so sir, a couple things. So first off, you hear a lot about JADC2, right? We talked about it at this morning's breakfast. But if we just break that down a little bit, first word in that is joint, right? Joint, and then all domain. So when I think joint, right, I think DISA. The network that we provide, the DISN, the backbone, the core of what we do, is that joint superhighway that enables communications to flow across the department, between the services, the combatant commands, so on and so forth, and national level leadership, right? So the services have their own pieces of that they do, but they all ride our superhighway, ultimately to get data where it needs to be to support the warfighter, right, in a bad day scenario or, on your everyday business kind of transaction. And we talk all domain, land, sea, space, right, cyber, air, throw that in there, but cyber, right? This is the cyber terrain that the department is fighting on. When you read in the news that there's cyber events impacting DoD, right, things of that nature, that's our terrain, that's us. So, from that perspective, when we look at that core network, it is actually designated as a weapon system, and it's designated that way because of the critical missions that it supports, right? And JADC2 is kind of a construct that underpins all of that. So investing in that transport, making it resilient and survivable, I think is a key component of this. I'll throw maybe two more out there. One would be modernizing the SIPRNet, the way we move secret data across the department. In today's environment, it's very disparate. A lot of different domains out there, services kind of doing their own thing, right? Fourth estate agencies doing their own thing. And one of the things we want to prioritize is how do we unify that architecture in a way that delivers data at much greater speed and probably more efficiently at the same time. And then kind of underpinning that as a key enabler, and we'll talk Thunderdome here in a few minutes, is SD-WAN technology, right? So the ability to segment our network, right? Stop lateral movement, those kinds of things, but also much more efficiently route data than we are today, is going to allow us to ultimately get after supporting the intent of JADC2 as we drive things forward. So there's kind of three areas that I kind of think about when I think command and control.
And hopefully you all attend General Rob Parker's JADC2 session tomorrow, right? And when you hear him talk, he'll lay out 5 or 6 lines of effort within JADC2. One of them's transport and network, one of them's ICAM, one of them's cloud, one of them's data, right? Those all kind of, and one is zero trust, and one is mission partner, right? Well, like 4 of those sound like what DISA does a whole lot of, right? ICAM, cloud, transport, right? And zero trust. Okay. Now, zero trust is Thunderdome. And so to be clear, Thunderdome is absolutely in alignment with JADC2's, MVP for zero trust. So the things we're talking about are in alignment, and you'll hear that tomorrow from General Parker. The second LOE for DISA and General Skinner's priorities is drive force readiness through innovation. And did I see Steve Wallace in here today? Oh, he just stepped. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, Steve may have joined us, but Steve's not here, so we'll throw them under the bus. But what do you think about innovation?
So again, I'll offer maybe 3 thoughts. One I've touched on briefly already, and that's the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability, or JWCC contract. And I say that because I think the department has come to the very clear realization that in order to move data at speed, which is critical to the way that we're going to fight and win in the future, we've got to have a platform that underpins that, that's scalable, right, and dynamic, much more so than maybe what we're used to, right? And we look at that as the commercial cloud, right? These hyperscale providers out there that know how to do this, they do it not just for DoD, but for the world, frankly. And we want to leverage the capabilities that they can bring in order to maximize our effectiveness. The other, I've touched on automation and orchestration, right? And I kind of think of that in 2 ways from a DISA perspective. One is, how do we automate our internal processes? I referenced earlier business systems and order entry capabilities, which sound maybe less sexy than some of the other cool stuff that's out there. But to me, it's critical because it drives what our customers experience, what our mission partners experience when they come to the front door of DISA looking for the capabilities they need to be successful. And not only is it that front end, how we take an order in kind of thing, but how quickly can we then provision it? How quickly can we make it real capability on the ground for our mission partners? And the ability to use automation and orchestration capabilities to do that kind of thing exists, right? Commercial world does it all the time. We've got to bring that into our mission space to be more effective, right? And that's where we can use you guys' help. The second side of that is more on the mission side, where how do we respond to cyber threats in closer to real time, right, in more near real time ways. You talk about orchestration type activities in that space. Got a lot of interest on the Hill, and something that DISA is very interested in moving forward on in terms of driving readiness through innovation. And then the last thing I'll talk to, General Skinner also touched on, I believe, enabling a mobile workforce, right? So in the environment we're in, DISA, like many of the companies you guys represent or work with, we're no different. We've got a hybrid workforce. We've got a lot of folks distributed throughout the globe. And what we've seen over the last, I'll say, 15 months or so in the pandemic is, particularly in our commercial solutions for classified space, we've gone from 2,000 secret phones distributed to 8,000. We've gone from 25 secret laptops capable of working from home kind of thing to several thousand, over 2,000. And what that tells us is we're not alone, right? The whole force is distributed, but they've got to be able to get mission done from wherever they are. And ultimately, in our view, that's a mission enabler, right? Because on any given day, we can be anywhere pretty much in the country, and we can be successful at executing command and control activities. But that's an area where we're looking to industry to help us with our processes and with our technical solution. Right now, candidly, it takes us too long to provision the devices. It's like a 45-step process, something like that. And that basically impedes our ability to accelerate adoption across the department. So we're looking for other ways that we can deliver that kind of mobility at scale, is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, maybe just kind of foot stomp, looking for help in that area, all right? 45 steps, oh my goodness, right? And it's not because there aren't better ways to do it. We know there are. There are a number of pilots out there in CSFC. There's like 17 plus pilots out there across the department. So we're learning from those, but we're not done learning. And so with your help, we could be in a better place sooner than later. The next area that the director talked about was leveraging data as a center of gravity. And let me tell you what, this is wide open in terms of where we can use your help. And so, Chris, your thoughts on this one here?
Sure. So a year ago, we didn't have a chief data officer in DISA, right? And that, please allow a moment for that to sink in, right? DISA, with the amount of data that we deal with, not only for ourselves, but on behalf of the department, that is a critical area. And so we recognize that. We've stood up an office of the chief data officer. We've resourced it. And I think there's maybe two ways to think about data, right? One is internal focus for the agency. And in that space, we really divide that to kind of like an A group and a B group. A would be how we use data to support our business operations and make better business decisions. But B, arguably equally or more important, is how we use data to make more real-time operational decisions going forward. So those are two kind of focus areas or problem sets, I'll say, that we, like many agencies, many in industry, I think, are working through and very much interested in partnering with industry on. And then I think external to the agency, we talk about data as a strategic asset, using it to facilitate information sharing, et cetera. DISA, just by nature of what we do, operating that superhighway and data centers and facilitating access to the commercial cloud, et cetera, right? We have access to, and we capture a lot of data. And so the question becomes, how do we best put that to use for the department? We talk about maybe adopting more cloud-native capabilities, right, as we do something like JWCC. Doesn't make sense to take all of our data out of the cloud, send it back to a platform, right, that incurs cost, significant cost. So how do we analyze the data where it's at? And that's something where not only do we need the tools to be capable in that space, but even training in some cases, right? Our folks are not always used to operating in that environment, and that's something that we've got to get after in that space.
And to be clear, it's not that we don't have data. It's not that we don't use data. It's not that we don't leverage the data that we do have. We underutilize the potential of the data that we already collect for example. And there's data sources out there that we probably should be tapping into that we're not. And so, again, wide open, for help here. The fourth one was harmonize cybersecurity and the user experience. And I know General Skinner said if you want to crush someone's soul, have them log in a couple times a day. And I think he also uses the example of someone that he knows that plays 3 songs or something to log in, and that's kind of his metric in terms of how long it takes to get onto the network. Maybe not a happy metric, but your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, so I think, as we've talked about, this is about how do we balance performance, right, the user experience again, with the need for security. And so, I'll probably pivot and talk a little bit of Thunderdome here about how we want to bring some capabilities together that I think can get after both of those things. First off, many of you probably tracking this, but our current state security architecture, when you think about DoD, is based on defense in depth. So what we've historically done is said, we want to protect the boundary of the network, right? We don't want to let the bad guys in, kind of a thing. So we have security at the perimeter where our network touches the internet. We have security at the midpoint, JRSS, Joint Regional Security Stacks, to look at traffic within DoD. And then we've got security at the endpoint. Think about your home laptop, your antivirus software, times 10,000 kind of thing is kind of what we've done in that space. And the bottom line is that what we do has shifted, right? The threat has shifted. It is not based on necessarily just protecting the boundary anymore. It's really about protecting the data. And so when we talk about zero trust, it's a buzzword that's used a lot. But what we really mean is, if we assume that the adversary has breached our perimeter, right, what's the next logical step? The next logical step is, well, I got to protect my data now, right? And what Thunderdome is designed to do is to pivot to that kind of a mindset across the enterprise, right? And it's based on 3, I'll say, core principles. 1, verify the user and the device, right? So we want to know that you are who you say you are. Your digital identity matches who you are. We want to make sure that your device checks out and is properly configured to connect into the network, right? And we want to do those things together, right, which forms a strong security bond. We want to then make access and privileges conditional. So once we verified you and your device can get on the network, we want to make sure that we only let you onto the parts of the network and to get the data sets that you actually should have access to, right? So you think about segmenting data sets off, things of that nature in that space. And then we want to verify data and applications explicitly. So when we do all of those things through a series of technologies that we can certainly talk more about, we get to a point where we have that assumed breach mindset. Therefore, we're not trusting, anyone or anything, right? And we're segmenting off that data so that it is much harder for an adversary to get after. And then underpinning all that, I mentioned SD-WAN earlier, that makes sure that we don't have lateral movement throughout the network. But if I bring this back to a user perspective, you say, well, what does all that security mean for performance? The SASE or Secure Access Service Edge component of Thunderdome allows us to move away from VPNs and to more of a direct connect kind of mentality into resources where they are, in the cloud, right, or what have you. And that's a much better user experience, much better routing experience behind the scenes than maybe what we have out there today. And so when you combine all that together, ultimately we should be more secure, but the user should feel like they're getting a better experience out of all that.
And it shouldn't take 3 songs to log in. And, and so this whole thing about user experience and security, Roger Greenwell kind of has the rose pinned on him for some of that, clearly, especially when it comes to, some of the security processes that we have. So the last topic, empowering the workforce. And let me just give you an example, and I'll go over to Chris. We've already done some RPA, robotics process automation, for our financial systems when Chris was the comptroller. And this past year, on our contracting front, we did 57,000 contract actions. And each one of those contract actions was touched once or multiple times by a human being electronically or, by hand, right? There's probably an opportunity to get after some of that somehow and empower the workforce to use some higher level, thought process to get after the mission. So, Chris, your thoughts on empowering the workforce?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we talk about internally in this space, right, is more internal focus, right, and maybe not as much of an interest to this audience. But I think the things that maybe are one, the shift to a hybrid workforce. We've talked about that, where if you go to our headquarters, right, it's 25% full on any given day, right? But we're still achieving mission, and we're doing that because we've enabled the force to work mobilely, as I was describing earlier. I think that the mission side of that, though, is by enabling a mobile force, we're able to execute our mission from anywhere, you know? And so when we talk about, distributed workforce or remote working, right, we can enable that not just for DISA, but ultimately for the entire department. That's what we're really out to do in that space.
Yeah, and what helps us helps others, right? And so in many ways, this is kind of a leader amongst the agencies and COCOMs when it comes to some of this stuff. And so to the extent that we can leverage that and move forward, it enables the rest of the global workforce to do that as well. Okay, so that was it. That was our 5 lines of effort that we went through. Hopefully gives you some insight as to where we're trying to go with some specific examples for you to help us. And a little bit more content-driven in this session, down in the details. And if you're not impressed by Mr. Barnhurst, who comes from a financial background, talking about SD-WAN and surface access, service, edge, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And so, someone who has like the mindset of how to resource something, but understanding the technology and the capabilities to move us forward, is absolutely very impressive. And so, I'm not sure if you have time for questions or not, Mike. We have 10 minutes for questions. Are any questions out there? Go ahead. There's a microphone over there, or right over there.
Elizabeth Memorial High School.
Go ahead. It's on now.
Okay, Frank Kidd, computer science teacher, Ellender Memorial High School, Homer, Louisiana, made famous by Hurricane Ida. Quick shameless plug. I'm a retired federal IT. I got my start with DCA 36 years ago. They hired me out of the college as a computer scientist intern. I retired from the Department of Labor 2 years ago. We started teaching computer science in my hometown this year. Next year, we plan to teach cybersecurity. So if there's anyone who wants to consider teaching K through 12 when they retire, please find me, because I'm also in the online certification program, so I can tell you all the ins and outs of that. I have 2 questions. First, did the current administration reinstate paid student internships? And my second question is if so, does DISA hire like graduate incoming freshmen for internships?
So, first of all, I have a DCA ashtray on my office table from back in the day. I use it for candy, though. But Chris, do you want to answer the personnel question?
Yeah, we should never come here without Lori Ramirez, our director of HR, right? So I think the short answer is yes. We do have paid student hires. So yes to that piece. The second piece was on, remind me, intern and graduate programs.
We
Yes, yeah. So, and that's actually what I did when I got my start at DISA, right? I was a freshman in college, got in with an intern, did summers and winters at the agency, and then signed on full-time after that. Yes, we do that to bring in pipelines of talent and those kinds of things.
I do know that some defense organizations stopped intern programs for a while. DISA didn't stop. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Question. My name is Patrick Powers. I'm with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So we've talked a lot about the enterprise. As a retired Special Forces officer, my question is, how are we fixing the problem to the foxhole? So the Pentagon can talk. In the country, I heard you say we can talk in the States. What about down there, far, far away in a fob or in the back of a truck? Because if the answer is going to the cloud, and I'm in a bad, dangerous place, that doesn't fix the problem.
I'll take a stab and if you want. So thanks for asking that question. And so as a multi-service agency, that does regular touch points with all the services. In fact, I had a touch point yesterday with the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is the conscience of the Defense Department. You know, they believe in one network from the Pentagon all the way to the foxhole, right? And so they keep us, you know, grounded in terms of the solutions that we have that need to be able to operate in a DDoS environment to include a future cloud capability. And whatever that looks like, right? SD-WAN, for example, is not just an enterprise capability. And in fact, JCSC down in Tampa is going to also pilot a SD-WAN pilot this year as well. And so we'll be staying in touch with JCSC in their SD-WAN efforts as well as with ours to make sure that we're learning from each other, and at some point, maybe there's a way to bring that together. So, great question.
I'm not going to let you off the hook, General. So the SD-WAN scenario is great, but what if I have to be disconnected? What if I'm in a submarine? What if I'm in hostile terrain and I can't broadcast and I can't use satellite? What if I'm disconnected?
And that's our Navy partners who usually say, well, all I get is an 8 megabit, you know, soda straw, right?
Right.
And how do we enable them to have more bandwidth in a, you know, environment that's not so close or maybe not so far away? You know, we do have low Earth orbit constellations that we see as a great potential to help the farther edges of, you know, the battlefield or in some, you know, place out at sea. No answer today, but the Navy keeps us grounded in that as well. So we have the Marine Corps saying, hey, you know, what's your solution to ensure that 365 goes to the foxhole, if that's what you're saying, right? And the Navy saying, hey, what's your answer to HBSS on a ship? And try to pull that through an 8 megabit, you know, soda straw. So work underway, working with our mission partners. More to follow. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, so just to get down to like a capability level, so we actually have a capability that we're piloting called Cloak. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for, I can't remember. But comes out of our, what used to be the Cloud Computing Program Office, and it effectively takes a number of different signals, right? So it can be military satellite, commercial cell, terrestrial network, et cetera. And it takes your data stream and it splits it across those different signals, right? And then it leverages commercial cloud capability to then put that signal back together on the other side, right? And what you can do is you can unplug any one of those or more of those different communications kind of vectors, if you will. Take down the milsat, take down the comsat, take down the terrestrial, right? Unplug a commercial link, and it will automatically reroute the packets and the communications accordingly. So something that we're looking at, we've tested it in CONUS, we've tested it OCONUS, and now we're working with the Marines to expand that a little bit. But it's that kind of a tactical kind of capability that ultimately I think can get after some of what you're describing. And the only thing I would say is there's no one solution fits all, right? That's a capability, not to say the whole department's going to leverage it, but there are others, to General Yee's point, that we continue to work to try to solve that problem. But I think DDoS has been, it has been the issue, right, for as long as I've been in DISA, I think, something that we've been hearing about. So
yeah,
hasn't
thank
gone
you.
away.
The thread common to all those is the cloud. And I think you have to make use of your data where it's collected. In some instances, you have to be able to perform those things disconnected, and then when you reconnect, you can. So every answer you've given me is cloud, right, constrained. So,
But I thank you for your question, because any solution that comes back to us needs to be able to also answer the question about the DDoS environment and how it's going to, ensure, command and control, ensure what we need to ensure. So,
yes,
thank you for the question.
Hi, Sean Ray. Thanks for having us all here this year. It's great. Per your comment about publishing the list of the changes in the organization, will you provide the deck to AFCEA?
The slide deck?
Yeah, we can do that.
It's probably It's probably going to get posted.
Yeah.
And this video will probably be posted too, huh, Mike? Okay, that'll be posted.
And then secondly, we focus a lot on the IP networks. I've been around building these networks with you guys for about 30 years. We've seen a lot of new challenges on the OT side, the air handlers, all the IoT that's handling all of this stuff, all the sensors we want so we get that data back. Could you talk a little bit about which organization within your organization is focused on those challenges, or are they spread across just like the IP?
Yeah, so that's actually within Don Means' organization, Stand Up Don. And so Don has a guy named Joe Walsall that works for him. Joe Walsall is an SES that works for Don, and he has that mission under the Emission Assurance directorate. Thanks.
Thank you.
How are we doing on time, Mike? We got one more question. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. Nice tie, John.
Thanks, sir. John Clayton with Isobar. As you've talked about the different opportunities where you want industry input, a lot of times we're waiting for acquisitions, and the forecast coming on Friday is fantastic. But how about pre-forecast? How are we getting our ideas to you for these specific areas you have need?
That's a hard question. So thanks for asking that, John. Because coming straight to us for an office call may not be the best forum for us to do that. And so maybe, I'm just thinking aloud here, it may be kind of dangerous. But what we've talked about was having focused industry days, right? Focused industry day on mobility solutions. Focused industry day on enterprise networks. Focused industry day on, you name it. So maybe what we do is follow up with some focused industry days on these 5 lines of effort, And then, you're asking questions, we answer all at the same time, and it's probably a better environment to have that more transparent, open discussion, right? Because otherwise, coming to us one at a time, going to Don one at a time, or, Roger one at a time, Jason one at a time, yeah, that'll just, overwhelm us, I guess. So thanks, John, for the question. So maybe we're kind of committing to doing something like that. All right, there you go. How about that, John? Good job. Say again? Oh, the brown bag. Yeah, right. Our director has done some brown bag discussions. We could also give some focused topics to those sessions as well. So, all right. Mike, we're done,
Okay,
I think.
before we wrap it up, how about a big hand for these speakers today? Fantastic. What a great kickoff with the boss up there on stage this morning, laying out the framework, and now you're able to dig down 2 or 3 levels here during this last hour. I'd like to say a couple things before we break. First of all, we can't do without DISA. But on the other hand, DISA can't do without you, the industry that's here, bar none. And I remember the days for outsourcing as a service. I was around during the NMCI days. And NMCI was a daily network. It didn't really deploy. And I remember going to FMF PAC one day. I was an employee for HP in those days. And I talked to the CG, and he looked at me and he says, Mike, this is my warfighting tool. How come I can't get out to the edge? And so that discussion continues on to today, but we're making breakthroughs on this. For Chris and Major General Yee, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your contributions today. Thank you for allowing industry to participate in this conference this week, and also for the Industry Day on Friday. So if you're going to be here, you may want to go back and hear these gentlemen and others again. To the audience, thank you for attending. We're going to go into just about a 30-minute break. The keynote lunch will start at 12 o'clock. Cyber Command's Executive Director, Mr. Dave Frederick, is going to be the speaker today. Please visit the exhibits if you're not an exhibitor. Government, go visit the exhibits. Enjoy your next 2.5 days here, and thanks again.